We're going to be talking about some of the more detailed analyses that we've done with faunal samples from archaeological sites. We're going to be looking at the original breeding distribution of northern fur seals, and we're also going to be looking at an example of sea otters and trying to determine what the genetic diversity of their population was before commercial harvesting began. Fur seals have been studied really intensively for about the past 200 years. There was a very lucrative, very important commercial harvest of their furs, and because of that, there was a lot of really detailed scientific studies determining where they lived, what their breeding distribution was. Prior to about the 1950s, they were only known to be breeding in extremely remote islands in the central Bering Sea, in the Pribilof Islands, and then also in the Russian Far East in a group of islands called the Kuril Islands and the Commander Islands, which are an extension of the Aleutian Island chain. In 1980, a new breeding colony was discovered. It was newly formed, and it was found in the eastern Aleutians. And in 1968, way down in Southern California in the Channel Islands, a breeding colony was discovered there that had established itself naturally. After that, archaeologists started to notice that there were fur seal bones, abundant fur seal bones in archaeological sites along the west coast of the United States. The next step in trying to figure out what the prehistoric breeding distribution was to actually get fairly precise age estimates for the bones of these seals. The process is simply going through and measuring as many complete bones as possible from archaeological sites up and down the coast. And what we found is that there are actually pretty solid evidence of rookeries or breeding colonies somewhere near the Washington coast, perhaps on the west coast of Vancouver Island. But then there also has been suggestion of extinct rookeries on the Oregon coast and on the central California coast, and potentially also in the Aleutian Islands, where there had never historically been reported any breeding colonies before. And today I'm at the Seattle Aquarium, and I'm meeting with Sean Larson, who's a conservation biologist. Sean, could you tell us a little bit about what you do here at the aquarium?
Sure, Mike. I'm the curator of conservation research here at the Seattle Aquarium. I study genetics and endocrinology of many different species here at the aquarium, as well as ecology. But one of my primary research projects is on sea otter genetics. And we started this project by looking at modern sea otter genetics and found that they have relatively low genetic diversity compared to other mammals. And that led us to ask the question, well, was this always the case in sea otters, or is this something that was caused by past hunting, extirpations, which we know occurred during the fur trade that began in 1741 and ended in 1911.
So what was your approach to try and figure that out?
How do you get samples from extinct animals? What we did know is that in Native American midden remains, there are a lot of marine mammal bones, you found out.
Right.
And so we contacted you and asked you if there were any sea otter bones out in the macaw midden remains.
And my answer was yes,
Yes.
there are.
Yes.
So Sean, we've got some bone samples here, and I was hoping you could just talk a little bit about how you took the samples from the ancient midden samples that we've analyzed.
So we're looking at long bones, and then we would drill a little piece of the bone, and out of that bone dust we were able to extract the ancient DNA. And what we found, based on the samples that we got from the macaw midden remains, is that sea otters that lived at least 400 to 600 years prior to today had twice the genetic diversity of sea otters that exist today.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. Sea otters and fur seals were hunted extensively for their fur during the fur trade started in 1741 and ended in 1911. And the reason why it ended in 1911 was because of the International Fur Seal Treaty.
The commercial harvest of fur seals had led to a complete population decline that was really catastrophic. They were down to a few 100,000 individuals, down from an original population level of 2.5 to 3 million animals. Wow. Just in the Pribilof Islands. And recently their population has been through another steady decline, and so there's concern that the overall population levels are getting dangerously low.
Right, very similar to the sea otters. So sea otters, so they thought there were about 150,000 throughout their whole range, and then after the fur trade there was maybe 1,000 animals from Japan, the Aleutian chain, and all along the west coast of the United States. They remained absent except for that small little population off of California. When they discovered that population off of California in the 30s, it was like they discovered dinosaurs because they thought sea otters were extinct.
They're pretty cool beasts.
So then to link the two studies that we've talked about in this session back to fur seals and sea otters, the archaeological record shows that not too long ago, both fur seals and sea otters had pretty different characteristics, their overall populations, in terms of genetic diversity and their geographic range, whereas today most people don't even know what a northern fur seal is. They used to be one of the most abundant animals on the Pacific coast. That's part of why we're so interested in using these archaeological samples to understand how the past was different from where we are today, and how that is mostly a consequence of the commercial harvests that were going on in the 19th and early 20th centuries.
As the climate is warming, and there are very few people who deny that it's warming anymore, the glaciers are going to be melting, the ice caps are going to be melting, seawater is going to be expanding just as a function of becoming warmer, and that's going to lead to sea level rise.
I've seen along the coast spectacular archaeological sites, just in incredible places that are such unique repositories of data. You know, they just exist nowhere else.
Yes, we have large samples already excavated from some fairly important sites, but there are many, many more that have never even been examined, and I think that there's the potential for a lot of information in those sites that exists nowhere else. This is what's called a sediment peel. It is an epoxy impregnated section from a real live midden site. There's tools that are found in there. There's the refuse from the meals. There is raw material for making new tools. There's all manner of stuff packed into these deposits, and the archaeologist's job is to try and figure out what all of that means.